Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back to another episode of Voice of Youth. Today, we are continuing on with the past few discussions we've had on expressing oneself, balancing lifestyles and everything. And today, we are tackling that question of how can one express themselves? How can they tackle different lifestyles that are pulling them in different directions or overlaying over one another, like we've mentioned before? And to continue this discussion, we have two guests with us today. We have Gurneet and Updesh, Kaur. So let's bring them on now. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So we've been going on in the past few episodes. We'll get straight into it because there's so much to talk about, and I'm sure you both have things that you want to share because it's an easy topic to get lost in and really just dive into expressing oneself. So I'll just give a brief rundown on what we've been talking about in the past few episodes. So we've tackled balancing different cultures, religions, lifestyles as a whole, because we've not only talked about Sikhism as a religion compared to Western culture in Australia, at least, we've also talked about and mentioned how different communities can affect a person differently. So we've brought up celebrations and traditions which aren't even Sikhi-based one, because we've brought up Eid, Diwali, and even Christmas, because you could be a Sikh living in a community where these things are so dominant in that community you live in that you could be exposed to them and it could change you, affect you, and not necessarily, I mean, in a bad way, but it could affect your lifestyle as a whole. And that is something we want to talk about. And in the end of it, we've also talked about family and how they can give pressure to you, how friends can peer pressure you, or how they can support you in either way, and how it all these small factors kind of build up to you and your lifestyle as a whole. So today we're going to be talking about expressing it and try to think of ways people can kind of balance these various ways of living. So Gurneet, we'll start off with you. What are some examples you may have or stories you may have heard or just things you know about and you could possibly share with people about expressing oneself?
So that's actually an interesting but difficult concept because we're sort of placed in a society where it's difficult to express yourself because of the different communities and interests you have. And from what I've observed, it's so easy to be placed on this platform where there's room for critique and people think that they can offer opinions with what you choose to do with your life or into the life you were born. So for me personally, I grew up in a more Punjabi environment, and then Sikhi sort of came after. Well, we were always into Sikhi, but none of us were Amritari. So for me, it was always Punjabi culture versus Sikhi. And I don't think those two are the same. It might be different for someone else. But for me, it was definitely like a sort of journey trying to figure out a balance between maintaining my connections with the Punjab community. And then also, well, it was kind of hard to show my Sikhi friends as well that, okay, I was born in this culture. I still have my friends and connections from there. And they sort of may have had their opinions for the events that I went to. And then Punjabi culture, my friends from there, well, back when I was into the Punjabi culture, Sikhi wasn't really a cool thing to be into. So, yeah, it was kind of hard finding a balance. But I think with age, you just sort of learn to do what you want. You find like-minded friends, and the people around me I know don't care what I do with my life as long as, we're all friends, we respect each other, we value each other for who we are as people and not our interests. Yeah.
Yeah, one interesting thing that you brought up was the Punjabi and Sikh kind of overlay with one another. How some people may do that, and one thing like that is always that we brought it up in previous episodes. How there's this kind of stacking of layers over certain attributes or things that you do in your lifestyle, and how that can kind of affect you because you kind of blend these things together, and it's so often that Punjabi and Sikhism is so often seen as one thing when in reality it's not. One's a religion, the other is a culture. And then from there itself, one thing you brought up was how peers may view you and view people out there in general. And that's one thing that I wanted to talk about in today's episode as well, was this idea of judgment and how people being judged or you judging others is one of the biggest things that stops someone from expressing themselves. We touched on this in the previous episode. And Updesh, I just wanted to see if you had any, sort of ideas. It doesn't have to be ones you've particularly experienced, but sort of events or situations you think that judgment can kind of, maybe it's by friends, maybe it's by family, maybe it's by the wider community, that it can kind of lead someone to question certain things they're doing and be unsure about themselves.
Yeah. I guess the biggest thing that comes to mind, and I know we were talking about this outside of this episode, was people. I've had conversations with people who, in terms of Sikhi, they're wanting to come into Sikhi and learn more about Sikhi and kind of develop that relationship with their spirituality, all that kind of stuff. And what I've found is their experience is that people who are already within that group that they kind of want to join, they seem to have a very they seem to feel as though they're quite judged because they're not at the same level as they are.
It's there in a way which you don't even realize it's happening, but it's always there. Or maybe you do realize it's happening, but to you it's such a normal thing, or to the people out there that it's such a normal part of their life. Where one thing that Shonje brought up in the previous episode was the fact that within the youth, at least, and obviously different sects of people and everything, there's a division between, maybe these people see themselves as Gursikhs and these people see themselves as not, and there's this, like a barrier between the two. The truth about it is that to some extent there are certain situations like that where groups of people, feel like they're separated from one another, and this unity is something we can always strive towards. And it's so easy to say, let's try to get that going, let's try to do this kind of stuff. But then ways in which that can happen is by breaking down these kind of stereotypical ideas we have, where you could be afraid to go to one group because of how maybe your current peers may judge you, or you could be afraid to do one action because of how it would represent your family. And that's something which is so often seen in Punjabi culture as a whole, where you've got this whole it's not the caste. Is it the caste system that I'm thinking of, or is the whole this family image that you have to maintain as a person? And that even ties into gender roles, to say, in a sense, because I can't really speak to that specifically regarding female roles. But if the two of you have anything you would like to say from a female perspective about your own things that you could experience regarding being torn between expressing yourself and then obligations in a sense to your culture or your religion or the community you live in. Does that make sense, or is that not really well explained?
Kind of.
It makes sense. It makes sense, but I wouldn't say I have anything female specific. But going back to the whole Punjabi culture versus Sikhi, so for me, they promoted a separate way of living, if that makes sense. So the Punjabi culture for me, learned that through exposure with the community that I was a part of, watching my parents as well. The language comes into it as well. There's a certain mentality to it, and it's different for everyone again. Whereas with Sikhi, when we decided to follow that more closely, me and my family, we all sort of had a choice with it. We all found our own way. It wasn't embedded into our psyche like Punjabi culture was, and we could decide to pursue it as a purpose if we wanted to. So sorry if that didn't make sense, but it's different. So for someone else, Sikhi was something could have been embedded into their life, and Punjabi culture followed through. Or for you guys, your parents are from Singapore, so it could, instead of the Punjabi culture, it could have been that. So for me, it was that. But when we decided to follow Sikhi a bit more closely, that's when I found myself in that situation where I'm like, okay, I can't be too Sikhi for my Punjabi friends, because for them it's gonna be weird, because we were well, back in Melbourne those days, actually, I was friends with everyone. I knew you guys too. We weren't a part of the same group. But with my Punjabi friends, things like Jay Sean and the Punjabi Hit Squad, which was like a British group of like singers, being into that stuff was cool. So if you knew all the British Punjabi singers, because back then those were the only people who could represent Punjabi culture in a Western society. So knowing who they were, listening to their music, listening to like BBC Punjabi radio, and having your like iPod Nano and those like USB MP3 players full of old Punjabi music was the height of cool. So the Punjabi community back then, we all knew each other. We were all invited to the same events. There wasn't much of an emphasis on Sikhi. We went to Punjabi school. We had Gurneet camps, but having people that were Amritari in your group back then was weird. And I remember after I took Amrit, one of my friends was like, "You chose to listen to Kirtan after everything you used to be into." So that was when I was just like, okay, I'm definitely not the height of cool anymore. So I don't think I cared though, because then I found, like you guys as well, made new friends, blah, 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 blah. I was always connected to them. So I still today find myself connected back to my childhood friends from back then. And then with my friends who are into Sikhi as well. And it's about finding a balance that works for you. I think the hardest thing for me was the whole people-pleasing aspect of it, which we'll have to some extent. But, my dad always says, learn to become unapologetically yourself. So you don't want to, be like, okay, these are my friends who are into Sikhi, but these are the people I need to say fateh to. And these are my friends who are into Sikhi, but I need to remember to say hey to them. So learn to become consistent with your own attitudes, your own values, and then you lose sight of, societal pressures, people pleasing, cringe culture. You just need to learn to become unapologetically yourself, and you find a certain sense of contentment, and you learn to find your own balance that works with your comfort levels.
Yeah.
See, I found it interesting. Like you brought up a lot, and that was good. But one thing I found interesting was that you brought up that Punjabi community that was into all those like singers and everything.
Yeah.
And then to me, growing up at least, that was never something I really experienced or I really knew people about. So then it was like I wouldn't say it's the exact opposite for me, but it's a different situation for me at least as well. I'm sure, Panna. I don't think you were into all those singers back then either.
It was a bit different. It was like a mix of, it was more so Sikhi, Australian Western culture and Singaporean culture. I never honestly really felt super connected to Punjabi culture, and I still don't think I do. And it was like a balance of trying to kind of manage all of those and wanting to be a part of all of those communities, but then never truly feeling a part of all of them. And I think something that you said before, Gurneet, it comes like finding that balance comes with age. I feel that's the biggest thing. You've got to go through like all these life experience what it's like to be a part of each of those communities as much like as you can, and then picking and choosing what works for you. I think that's the biggest thing. Because whenever we would go back to Singapore, I would always really want to be part of that community, and like really like I would love being in that like environment, but then I would still feel like I was too Western, I was too Australian. When I was at school, I never felt Western enough. I was too like, because like I was the only brown person in my school sometimes, and like and then when in Sikhi, that's like I felt the most comfortable. But then at the same time, like I couldn't be like my full Western self, and I couldn't be my full Singaporean self. Like it's hard to explain, but with age, I feel like that comes, you start to learn more about yourself and what you value. And then that's where you can find that balance, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we can only say what we say through experience. We can't give a generic answer that we can try and generalize to everyone. Because you can only preach something if you know that it works for you.
But
we've had those lived experiences, which is why we know how to work around the comfort levels today.
Yeah, it's this when you say age, it's always that famous saying, with age comes wisdom or something. I'm pretty sure that's the saying. And it's true, because when you grow up, because when you go through all these experiences, and there's so many people I'm sure out there watching these episodes, which in their own way have had experiences and have had found solutions to it in their own way. Maybe there's some people out there who haven't found solutions. And when you listen to what we say today, maybe we say it to a specific example, but then you could always try to take this and apply it to maybe your own situation or your friend's situation, because maybe you know someone out there who's confided in you and shared maybe their struggles with, being not Western enough, not Punjabi enough, not Sikh enough, or any of those situations. And it's always about trying to find a balance as well in that sense. Because if people might say, I want to go out, a party with my friends, and there's nothing wrong with going out and having a night out with your friends. But at the same time, do you say, I'm gonna go out. I'm not gonna go to Gurdwara for several weeks in a row. I'm not gonna go get Babaji's darshan. You don't have to go to a Gurdwara to even pray or do anything of the sort. But maybe you have a guru's Babaji's room or something of the sort in your own house, and you don't go check that or anything in that sense, and you keep on going out with friends and friends and friends. And if that's a lifestyle you want to choose, go for it. But if you want to have that balance, maybe try to have, because for whatever reason, we have, like, the Sikh community, at least in Australia, has Wednesdays and Saturdays, I believe, are really popular days to go to the Gurdwara. I don't know why. It's just, I don't know if you guys know why. Maybe that's something I just never learned. But then what it happens is that you could say, this Saturday, I'm going to go to the Gurdwara and I'm going to try to get that balance, and maybe plan a schedule, maybe do what you can, so that way you can express yourself, go out and have fun with that group of people. But at the same time, if you want to have that sort of balance, if you want to be a part of both worlds, try to plan ahead for that kind of stuff. And that's one possible way you can express yourself, because when you do that, you don't then come to Gurdwara. And if people say, oh, this person went out and had fun with their friends, and I don't mean in the sense that they went out drinking and doing all these things. I mean in the sense that they just went out and had a late night with your friends, in a sense, where you just went out and had some fun. Yeah. But then you don't come into a Gurdwara, and don't try to let those people, if people say that stuff to you, don't try to let that change you and try to put you down. You try to not fight back, but try to ignore it and be the better person, in a sense, and be like, I'm here at Gurdwara not to listen to you say these things about me. I'm here to try to focus on maybe doing some part. Maybe you don't have access to a good car, so you do some part there. Maybe you're there to listen to the Ragi Jatta. Maybe you're there just to sit down, because a Gurdwara can be a pretty relaxing place when there's no Sangha. It's early in the morning, or maybe it's that afternoon section where they're doing like Sukhmani Sahib or something, and you just sit there and you're there for yourself. And that's the main thing YouTube also brought up, is that you do it for yourself. Yeah. So, we're getting close to about the end of this episode. Is there anything that the two of you would like to bring up before we wrap this thing up?
I just wanted to quickly bring up, if just in terms of because I know what we've said isn't really very practical. It's more so, you've got to find what works for you. It's very general. But I feel like for me, whenever I feel like I'm feeling a little bit disconnected or from a certain culture or my Sikhi or whatever it is, I think you just have to make a bit more of a conscious effort. And that's something that I'm learning a lot this year as well, is that you really have to, it might be hard, but you have to kind of make a conscious effort to be like, okay, I'm noticing that I'm slipping in this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to and choose a specific thing. So for example, if I feel like I'm slipping in my Sikhi, then I'll make a conscious effort to maybe, okay, once a week, I'm going to sit down and listen to Katha, or pick up the Vajan, do Kirtan. You make that really conscious effort, and that's how you can kind of connect back to it, I guess.
It's the same sense when you try to have that conscious effort. The easiest example you can bring up for the youth is student life, where you have to, if you have this assignment due, you might want to be playing video games or reading a book or just watching some show on Netflix or anything of the sort. But you have to put in that effort to try to get that work done for you to actually be getting it done. It's so easy to say, I'll do this, I'll do that. But then once you put in that conscious effort, you can then see an end product in a sense. So that's a great way to wrap this episode up. Gurneet, if you have anything to say, I'll let you give you a shot just before we wrap this whole thing up. Otherwise,
so I think we've definitely become a bit more progressive in it's 2020 in making people feel like they belong and their interests and who they are. That's validated. But for me, what worked was using strength from previous situations to expand my horizons a bit more. So the fact that I'm still a part of all these communities, the Punjabi community, the multiple Sikh communities that I'm a part of, to me that's a strength that I've observed in myself, because I know that I'm there for my reasons and no one else needs to have a say in why I'm there. I know I'm there because I just love being there. I get something out of it. And the fact that I'm still here after all, people's opinions and everything, I use that as a strength only to continue to do what I want to do. So I think another practical method is use your strengths, use what you've found out about yourself, assess your thought patterns and behaviors, and just try and figure out what it is. And it's for you. I think seeking validation and people pleasing are a hard thing to evolve from, but again, like we said, with age you realize that people didn't matter in the first place. If you love doing it and you feel you're critiqued for it, you're possibly not in the best friendship group in the first place anyway. So just do you really.
All right, that's a great way to kind of wrap this episode up. For everyone out there, thank you for watching this episode. Hopefully you've got something out of it. Maybe you've related to one of the situations we've brought up, or maybe you've heard of something that might push you to kind of take that conscious effort or change that situation you're in. So thank you to everyone for watching this. Thank you to the two guests for joining me today. We're talking about how can we express ourselves. If you haven't yet checked the previous episodes, which build up to this one episode itself, go check them out on the playlist itself, YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching this. Please make sure you also leave a comment, like the video, and share it around. So thank you once again to the two guests for joining me, and thank you to everyone out there. I'd just like to laugh at them one last time. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.